Greetings and salutations, fellow avatars of ancient Egyptian gods. It is I, Eric J. Chucky, joined as always by the boy.
Hey.
This is the Two Nerds Podcast, and today we are talking about Moon Night. Before we get into that, of course, there's a ticker at the bottom of your screen right now. Read what you see there. There's a link tree in the description. Click on that. Click all the links you find there. Buy everything you can. We'd really appreciate it if you sub to us on Patreon for only $1 a month. We will call you cool.
Because you will be cool.
Yeah, you will be cool. Yeah, it's not like we just do that. You become cool by doing so.
And we must tell the people.
Right. So that's Jesse Weock. That is Passion Killer 711. That is a guy from Ohio. And that is Rob. Eventually, I will have to make a list, and I won't be able to just remember them all. Also at the $5 tier, you get early episodes of Journey of Wrestling, so if you guys are into that, that could be into you.
There you go.
There I go.
Time to talk about Moon Night.
Time to talk about Moon Night. This is a show that we were going to keep current with, I believe. After the glut of TV shows at the beginning of this year, we had a nice break. It wasn't too much of an overload to watch. And then I watched the first episode, and it was okay.
And I watched the first episode, and it was okay. And I watched the second episode, and I'm gonna be honest with you, listener, I did not like it that much. So I decided, at that point, to wait until it'll come out. And I believe you decided after the first episode.
Yeah, I felt like a complicated story was going to unfold, or it was going to be bad. And either way, I wanted to have every piece of the tapestry before I rendered judgment upon it, which is the whole point of this podcast. Now, spoiler-free review of Moon Night. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way while we're here at the top of the show. What would you say, my friend?
I would say that now that it's all out, it's definitely worth the watch. It comes together, the pieces all sort of fit together, and it becomes a very good self-contained story. If you were unfortunate enough to be like me and watch it week to week, I feel like you, or at least, I did for the first 2 episodes, I feel like you probably got a lesser version of the story than someone who was able to just absorb it all at once. This is very much a story that it has been done this series was done no favors by the week-to-week release schedule.
Yeah, I would, as Disney, moderate that a little differently.
Well, but, I mean, it's clearly just what they're going to do, because I understand why they do the week-to-week release schedule. Right. 1, it keeps people coming back to the app. It makes the app a habit, which is good.
Yes.
2, and probably more importantly, it gives people more time where they can be talking about this thing, and you can be up to date, and you guys can talk about what happened and anticipate what's happening next. When something comes out all at once, a la Netflix style, like, say, Tiger King, it becomes a phenomenon for a brief period of time, but then it falls off. Whereas if you're releasing it week to week, it stays in the public consciousness and thus drives Disney Plus subscriptions a lot longer. Your
downtime between miniseries is shorter. We've got Obi-Wan coming up pretty soon, I believe later this month.
That is also another reason. It gives you a reason to keep coming back.
So, we could say that about Arcane, which was week to week, or The Witcher is maybe more accurate. The Witcher drops all at once, you watch The Witcher all at once, and then you go talk about it for a little while, but that does fade off, and you don't talk about it really again until the next year. So that's a very apt observation, I think. Probably the greatest benefit to releasing it in that fashion, and perhaps that benefit outweighs the drawbacks, if any. I don't water cooler talk. Even when I was working in a place where that sort of thing was common, I mean, you guys know me. If you've been watching the podcast for a while, I don't like to fantasy book, to speculate too hard on what might be coming next.
And thus accidentally disappoint yourself.
Right, because I might set something up for myself that I think is very cool and exciting, and when it gets here, I'm disappointed by it, because nothing could live up to the imaginary, custom-tailored to me expectations I had invented. And Moon Knight as a series did suffer from that a little bit. So I'm honestly glad that I watched the first episode and then shotgunned the rest a lot later, after I'd had time to deal with the fact that maybe Moon Knight won't be great.
Yeah, it had time to temper expectations. I'm glad I watched the first episode. I am honestly a little sad I watched the second before shotgunning the rest, because it really put me off. I don't like the second episode by itself very much. I think going back as a part of the overall narrative, I think it probably is just fine. But it just wasn't my favorite cup of tea. So it really dampened my expectations in a bad way for the rest of the series, that the series kind of had to claw back from for me personally. So were I able to do it over again, I probably would just watch the first episode and then leave off until it's done.
Yeah. I think now is the time we need to get into spoiler-ish territory. I think we're both going to try to stay away from the bigger moments. Not that there's too much that's like a proper spoiler. It's not like, Khonshu tears off his bird head and is secretly Thanos or something.
Right. I mean, before that, it is good. It works now. That it's all together, it's good.
Yeah. And I would recommend watching it.
Same.
It's an interesting show, and I think it's going to be... I hope it's going to be a larger part of the Marvel Universe going forward.
That's sort of up in the air.
It is. I did a little bit of reading before the show, and it's a question mark right now.
Oscar Isaac has been burned by so many comic book properties and long franchises at this point that he's not terribly enthused about being stuck playing a comic book property for a long period of time. Which, I mean, to be fair, he did a great job. But that's the sort of thing you should probably work out with your actor before they sign on to play a comic book hero. If they're like, yeah, I'm not really sure I'm into the idea of playing one for like 6 seasons in a movie or whatever, get someone else. He did a great job. Oscar Isaac did a great job. But if they're like, no, I think I'm going to be one and done. I think we're going to get one appearance of this character and then, no more. Okay, get someone else. Get someone else for the role.
On the other hand,
simple.
I can kind of see where Disney's at on that one, because this is a C tier, I'd say, Marvel character, maybe even D tier.
It's just bad planning, because it's you booking a wrestler who has no plans of getting over.
Sure.
You don't know. You can go be in someone else's ring. I want someone who's at least open to the idea of getting over.
Yeah. I time will tell. You know what I mean? And if the money is right, and if Disney's behind it...
Apparently he had a great fucking time filming it. Better than any other comic book property he's been in. So he's open to the idea of coming back if the story's right. And that's nice. And that, it's very good actor stuff and principles and all that.
If the story's right is like your parents saying maybe when you ask them for something.
Yeah, it's... I don't want to say yes. I don't want to say no. I'd like to keep my options open. Thanks.
Yeah. It depends on the pessimism of the day and whether or not you forget about it. But the show in and of itself, I got a very strong late 90s, early 2000s superhero style movie vibe from a lot of this.
Yeah, it felt very much like a good version, and keep in mind, I did like this movie. I still kind of like it. It has a special place in my heart, despite the fact that I know it's not very good. It felt like a good version of the Daredevil adaptation.
My reference point was Spawn. It felt very similar to the 90s Spawn movie. A little over the top, a little, more jokes than you'd usually have in a film or a series of this. Gravity sounds like the wrong word.
It is a Marvel series. There's a lot of jokes, there's a lot of quips, but it tackles fairly serious subject matter.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of Moon Knight, though. I don't think it is played as gritty as I would have expected.
Yeah, I absolutely... This is honestly about as gritty as I was expecting. A little less than I hoped. Because Moon Knight is typically one of the grittier Marvel properties in general.
We left off the series on a very, of that era superhero situation where, I have done the morally right thing and am the good guy.
Yeah, I did not. That doesn't feel like Moon. But that's well after what we're talking about right now. I think it would bear mentioning. I don't know if we need to go episode by episode, but like, what do you feel is like a good way of describing this rhythm of the series?
I feel like it's a trilogy of 2-hour movies. The first 2 episodes being the first movie, the second 2 being the second, and the third 2 being the third.
I don't hate that.
Tonally, the first 2 are very, like, shticky superhero nonsense with a lot of bumbling comedy. The second 2 are your Mummy and or Indiana Jones adventure films. And the final episodes are very...
a superhero movie.
Well, and very much a climax in the way...
Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End.
Precisely, yes. Exactly the reference I was going to make. Where it starts kind of strange and ponderous, and you really had to see the other 2 to have a full idea of what's going on.
But then most of the movie is a climax to the trilogy, as it were.
Yeah. And a pretty good climax. All things considered. There's some hanging edges here and there. I think it bears mentioning the chief frustration you had, and I shared, although for less amount of time, after watching the second episode.
Yeah, so, alright. There are lots of different Moon Knight continuities. And the MCU was always going to do their own thing with it. I kind of went in expecting that. But in my heart of hearts, I did love and did want the version of Moon Knight where it's not just that, you know, the people around him aren't sure if he has superpowers. It's that the narrative never makes it clear if he has superpowers. It is something of an open question. He definitely sees Khonshu. He definitely talks to Khonshu. He definitely does stuff that probably is superpowers, maybe. Or maybe he's just very, driven?
I mean, like, what if Daredevil could actually see?
Yeah.
And he just convinced himself he was blind, like so much 90s Kane.
Very, very interesting reference. I like it.
Thank you.
But, like, and that's honestly my favorite. I like playing with that in a comic book setting. In a visual medium, like television, you know, with especially a modern MCU property, he was always going to actually have the superpowers. I knew that going in.
Sure.
But, like, the second episode, one of the reasons I didn't like the second episode is because they did a lot of work to, like, set the groundwork for is he actually crazy? Does he have superpowers, or is this all in his head? And then just went, no, he has superpowers. Okay, then why did you waste so much of my time doing that?
And so much of the narrative, real estate that you have access to in building that up.
Like, it wasn't necessary, because you knew you were going to have him actually have superpowers. I knew you were going to have him actually have superpowers. You didn't need to make it a thing. That's... If you're not going to do the thing that I'm interested in, pretending that you might is just a great way to disappoint me.
If you're going to kill off a character in the second episode, why did you spend half of the first episode telling me about their backstory?
And you're not even, like, trying for, like, pathos or to make their death feel bad. It's just sort of a thing that happened, and then you kill them like, nope, lol, and then someone goes, wagwan, in a big voice after you do it. I did love that line, to be clear, but, like, it's just emblematic.
Now that was part of the problem in general, was stopping there. Like you said earlier, in the non-spoiler version, if you stopped at that point and were, like, mad about it, you know, if one did, not just you, my commentary partner here, you'd be perfectly justified, because it just seemed like it would seem like not honoring the character.
A lot of 2 episodes fucking faffing about for no reason.
Yeah. Fortunately, that does come back in a lot of ways.
They do tie it back in a way that works really well later, especially in episode 5. That really ties that narrative note together in a way that feels good and feels like it's of service to the character as, you know, as he is in comics. I liked that. And it, like, if I lived in a world where I hadn't seen episode 2 and then I just watched this all at once, I would have had several weeks fewer of being upset about it.
Right. And that's unfortunate. I mean, you know, it's kind of the problem with stopping there and continuing. Maybe if you had just watched it week to week and the next week had absolute reassurance that things were, you know, going to be a little different, that might have been interesting. But it took a lot of time, and that can be good on the psyche, the quality of the palate to digest such a property.
Sometimes it's better to get time in between episodes of a thing to sit and digest and think of them. Sometimes it's better to eat it all at once.
Yeah. As I said earlier, my expectations were probably higher than I would usually try to keep them, just because I really like Moon Knight. I think he's very cool. I wouldn't call myself an expert.
Me neither. Like, oh, certainly not.
Everything I've seen of him that wasn't just a hilarious comic panel edit about the money he is owed by Dracula, I find him a very compelling and interesting character. I like most Batmen, and he is a Batman. He's a Midnighter.
Yeah, that's fair. That's much more fair.
But this didn't end up being what I really wanted out of Moon Knight, which was, you know, the character by way of Netflix's Daredevil series.
Yeah, he's not... I like Moon Knight. Moon Knight, in my heart of hearts, is always a little bit more of a hard, like, dude.
Yeah.
He's not Frank Castle, but they have... How to put this?
Moon Knight should have more in common with Frank Castle than he does Captain America.
Yes, that's a great way of putting it. Those two should be able to get along, you know, fucking Moon Knight and the Punisher get along a lot better than Moon Knight and Cap.
And this is an origin story. So we spend at least half of this miniseries unfolding, unpacking, and then repacking, and then reconfiguring, and then a lament configuration thing happens, and then we have to unpack again, and then repack again. Moon Knight's backstory.
Yeah, because, I mean, to be fair, it's a weird one.
I'm not mad about this.
No, I think you absolutely needed a series to do Moon Knight's backstory, because it's... And they do a lot of streamlining and a lot of changing and shifting things around in a way that makes things more palatable, better for modern audiences, and just cleaner, distilled, refined, like the MCU usually does. But it's still a weird one. Like, Mark Spector's life has not been... a simple affair.
No. Certainly didn't really follow a linear path. Most people's personal headcanons about themselves don't have branches. Another thing I would like to criticize before we move forward is inconsistency in the quality of the CGI.
Yeah, this was the thing that really bothered you about the series.
Yeah.
I wasn't really bothered so much, but like I acknowledge that it is true. It just didn't bother me. I try not to be a practical effects only grognard,
because that's not helpful to anything.
Because it's absolutely not going to happen, so it's pointless to be butthurt about it.
Right, but like when you have a perfectly good Moon Knight suit and perfectly good stuntmen, why not just have him look cool? You know, if your effect doesn't look great in certain lighting, don't put it in that lighting. I mean, notably, as an example, the title card you are at the option to look at right now, Khonshu does not look great. He looks fine, but he looks like he's from a video game, whereas Moon Knight might be from a cutscene in the same video game, might be real. And that's because I fucked with the lighting, you know, for a title card. He's much more in shadow, the colors are much less saturated, etc., etc. But you got a lot of that, especially with a lot of the early monsters.
You made particular note of the Jackals.
Yeah, they didn't look great.
They looked like Huts.
Yeah, they had that weird shininess to them.
They look like they're CGI characters.
Yeah.
Like, Huts are just like that now. They just look computer-generated. The Jackals look unreal. They look hyper-real. And honestly, I think it may have been an intentional choice.
And I would believe that. But you know, again, as we said, taking this episode by episode as opposed to all at once, or specifically in the way we did it, it didn't foster faith.
Yeah, it doesn't inspire confidence.
Yes, yes.
That one of the first big effects shots is this Jackal who looks like he's from Hellboy, the one with Ron Perlman, at best.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That like it wasn't that weird matte quality that a lot of early CGI had. I don't know if that was as good as Hellboy.
Yeah, well, I mean, most of Hellboy's effects were practical.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And that just bothered me. But, like, at the same time, there were models, one of which I will not speak. Because if you haven't seen the series, you deserve to see it yourself.
Yeah, we're even in the spoilers, yes, version. We're kind of dodging around stuff because it is, at certain points, a mystery story. And you deserve it. You deserve to get it.
There's a couple of surprises that pump out that I think are cool and should be seen. But a character that shows up is entirely CGI. And I think they were incredibly well done. They looked like they were there.
I think I know who you're talking about.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
The smallest details and movements and actions.
And they still had that hyper-real aesthetic.
Right.
But they fit.
I mean, I don't expect any computer animation to look like it's absolutely not computer animation. Rocket Raccoon is clearly not an actual raccoon. But, like, especially when you've put out this many movies, I kind of want something that's in a similar ballpark. And it didn't bring me into it. You know, it hurt my suspension of disbelief when things looked artificial. More than they did bring me into the world of, is this real? Is this not real? And as a viewer who doesn't know anything about Moon Knight, why would you know to question that in the first place?
Well, that's what they're doing in the first couple episodes. Is
Sure.
They're teaching you that you should question that.
But like by episode 4, I believe, yes, the monsters that appeared in that were pretty cool, and things were pretty strong there. The creepy click men,
which I think were mostly practical effects.
Were they? Maybe
they had the look.
Yeah. By then, I was watching it on a very small screen, the kind that Cinemark would rather I didn't. So
they get very upset.
Yeah, they've got whole ads about that. But
it's not an option with Moon Knight.
No. Watching a lot of the Disney Plus series on our TV has been a detriment. Our TV's not that old,
but it's old enough.
Yeah,
and more importantly, our monitors are much newer.
Yes, I did have a better time watching it on my phone and my computer monitor. So maybe take that with you when you go to watch the show. Might not be great for your TV unless it's a newer one. I would like to, if we can, abstractly a bit, talk about episode 5.
Episode 5 is, well, depending on how abstract you want to be, it's one of my favorite little fictional tropes that happens in a lot of supernatural stories from eventually. At some point, they always do this episode.
Sure.
And I do like this episode. And to be fair, they only stick with the episode format for a bit. They don't let the premise wear thin.
No.
Which is good because it is kind of old hat at this point, so it could have.
But I like the way in episode 5, and I believe a bit in 6, if I remember correctly, they kept returning to it.
Oh, yeah, definitely in
They
6.
used a lot of storytelling techniques that you would get in stuff like Inception that was very, it made you question the reality of situations in a way I would have loved to have seen earlier in the series.
Yeah, more of the kind of, less of the kind of subterfuge in 1 and 2, more of the kind of subterfuge in episode 5, I think is what we're saying.
I don't know. By the end of it, in general, I just, 5 was a high watermark for me. 5 was one of the best episodes of an MCU show I've seen. I don't think the rest of the season compares. I think overall it's good.
5 is definitely very high concept.
Sure.
You don't get there without laying the ground.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I liked episode 6 quite just fine. I think it was a good, solid superhero punch-up. Episode 6 is the climax. I disagree fairly heavily with like one specific very sort of pivotal moment. There are definitely reasons that you could have made that choice in character as the people involved that would make sense and wouldn't be wildly out of character. But like I feel like they didn't put it through well enough that those were the reasons, and in their absence, it feels like a decision that doesn't fit who Mark Spector is.
I'm curious about what may or may not have been left on the cutting room floor, because I believe episode 6 is shorter than the rest.
But
we don't have timestamps here, but...
Also, I know why they end up... Like, the functional in-universe reason is different from the functional doyalistic out-of-universe reason. The reason they make that decision is so that they can have a fun mid-credit scene.
Right. Well, and to, give you the buy-in for future opportunities to see Moon Knight, whether that's in movies in the greater MCU, a continuation of the series, whatever happens or doesn't end up happening.
Because they definitely both close the story off and leave the door open for sequels.
I will say that I am content with the Moon Knight we got. You got all the visuals you really wanted to get from Moon Knight. The big open crescent cape, him using his not batarangs, moonarangs.
The one thing I was missing was given to me in the mid credit scene. So
yeah. It was a classy drop. Only the last episode has a mid credit scene, and it was a pretty good one.
Yeah, the rest of them are just normal credits and long too. These are hour-long timestamp episodes. They're about 45 minutes. The last 15 minutes is credits. Yeah,
they have a lot of
fair.
Yeah.
Like, put those people, give respect to their name, but and all that. But like, just so going in, don't commit to like an hour of time. It's not going to take that long.
Yeah, don't do the Marvel thing until the last episode, and even then, after you get that mid-credit scene, it's good. You can go home. Well, you are home, so you can go to the kitchen,
something else.
Get yourself some fries.
Yep.
Anything else specific that you have to say about Moon Knight?
I do want to say, like, misgivings aside, Oscar Isaac puts forth a command performance.
I don't think there's a bad actor in this show.
Absolutely not. No, I can't even think, like, even the people who were relatively bit parts were fucking great.
That one guy on the roof I really liked. I really liked the very brief arc of his character. Very enjoyable. I like Khonshu a lot. It's exactly what I wanted out of Khonshu.
Yeah, dickhead.
But like deep-voiced and self-important.
Yeah.
A lot of stick energy.
Deep voice, self-important Birdman with schemes. You know what? You sold me. That might be a surprise, but I'm in. I'm sold. I'm here for it. But Oscar Isaac particularly has a lot of work to do in this series. He has a lot of ground to cover. He has a lot of narrative weight he needs to carry, and he has to be able to convincingly portray two different people really strongly without much in the way of help from, like, Gollum Smeagol-esque camera angle changes and shit like that. And he does a great job.
Yeah.
Even when he's not talking, you never really confuse Stephen Grant and fucking Mark Spector. You don't. So, I like that, personally.
Yeah, I agree. And I think everybody supplementing... Ethan Hawke deserves special recognition because this was a very well-written, well-performed version of an absolute zealot who is able to use their cult of personality status to form an actual cult.
Yeah, and like the narrative does a lot of work in making him a very talented manipulator. One of the few other criticisms I have in the series is that while his performance is always up to that standard, sometimes the writing isn't always up to the standard of selling him as that very powerful, believable manipulator, and he instead makes the people he's manipulating look a little stupid.
Absolute belief in a concept.
It gives someone a genuineness of character, a charisma, a power.
And those people can be, if they feel like the end goal is beyond reproach, then there's a lot of flexibility that can be recognized as gullibility within their moral fiber in the face of a perhaps imperfect leader. But I did want to make special mention of him because, like, we've had characters like this before in Kaiselis, who was a little underwhelming, and a lot of cackling figurehead type characters that are very comic booky.
Yeah,
and he didn't really feel
Kaiselis was Mads Mikkelsen, so him being underwhelming was fucking that's saying something.
It seems like you brought in a Mads Mikkelsen and you didn't really use it.
You could have done more with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's about all the specific praise I have for the actors. I don't think anybody did a bad job.
No. I wanted to specifically call out Oscar Isaac because I feel like he has so much. He is the main character of the series, and he has so much fucking work he has to do that he did that good of a job is actually very impressive.
Yeah.
I do like, and you mentioned this, I do like that they had Arthur Harrow commit. He was absolutely it's very easy to give in to the temptation to have your schemy, weird zealot bad guy shrink from the consequences of his actions a little bit if it's going to come back negatively to bite him in the ass. That they had him not do that at all, I like that.
Yeah, I did too. I also enjoy the way they portrayed the characters. As much as it really kind of wore at my patience in the first 2 episodes, it was better that they introduce us to Stephen Grant before Mark. I think you need to have that, if you'll forgive the term, whoopee there to sympathize with.
You need a sympathetic main character who's a nice, very sweet fish out of water so that you can exposit at him. Steven is a very useful main character, and I think it's a good idea to have him as the first introduction.
Yeah. Whereas Mark Spector, you could have led with him. You could have, absolutely. He is a troubled man in an action field of, business that has a moral core. And that's the main character of so many fucking movies. Like, it would have been easy as hell to lead off with him and have a lot of fun with it. But the fact that they chose not to, and the way they chose not to, and then the conflict between those two facets of the character was that much more organic, believable, and well told through the specific execution they chose.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of other thoughts. It's absolutely worth the watch now that it's all complete.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to the next series we get to enjoy. There's a lot of stuff coming in the pipeline, and I wouldn't mind seeing more Moon Knight in the future, but if we don't get it, that's okay too.
Everything's better when nerds talk about it. Fuck it!